This is Sky News at 7 o'clock. I'm Mark Austin with a special programme on the conflict in the Middle East. The United States and Israel strike Iran as President Trump calls for regime change in Tehran.
Lay down your arms. You will be treated fairly with total immunity, or you will face certain death.
Among the targets, the compound of Iran's supreme leader, but a foreign ministry spokesman tells me the Ayatollah and the president are still alive.
They are all safe and sound.
Sirens and explosions in Israel as Iran strikes back at targets across the Middle East. Even holidaymakers in Dubai felt the effects as fire breaks out at a luxury hotel. Sir Keir Starmer confirms British planes were in the sky today in the Middle East. We'll have all the latest this hour. Good evening. The Middle East has been plunged into another conflict tonight after the United States and Israel carried out a massive attack on Iran. Senior regime figures were targeted, but an Iranian spokesman has told me this evening that both the supreme leader and the president are alive and well. This morning, President Trump spoke directly to the Iranian people, telling them to rise up and overthrow the regime. But that regime has retaliated, hitting targets in Bahrain, Qatar and Abu Dhabi, with even holidaymakers in Dubai feeling the effects of the conflict that has erupted. Tonight we'll hear from our correspondents in the region, as well as in Washington and Downing Street, after the strikes, which have been threatened for weeks, became a reality, raising the prospect of a wider conflict. Our Middle East correspondent, Adam Parsons, has our first report.
An attack that had long been anticipated, but somehow still came as a surprise in the daylight of a Saturday morning. Israel and America launching war against Iran. Tehran, their main focus, targeting military and political leaders, and those at the top of the Republican Guard that oversees so much of Iranian life. This, the compound used by Ayatollah Khamenei. It looks flattened, but it seems the supreme leader had been taken elsewhere. Iran says he is unhurt.
Can you confirm with specificity that the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is alive, and separately that the Iranian president is alive right now following these American and Israeli strikes?
As far as I know, yes, they are alive, and the head of judiciary as well, the head of the Speaker of Parliament as well, all high-ranking officials are alive, and the Secretary of the National Security Council. So everybody is now in its position, and we are handling this situation, and everything is fine.
America's president, who had built up an extraordinary military presence in the run-up to this attack, was typically bullish, keen to bring about regime change in Iran.
We are going to destroy their missiles and raise their missile industry to the ground. It will be totally, again, obliterated. We're going to annihilate their navy. We're going to ensure that the region's terrorist proxies can no longer destabilize the region or the world and attack our forces.
The attack brought a response. Iran launching a barrage of missiles towards Israel. Very large boom we've just heard in the skies above us, above Jerusalem. And so this is the cacophony. And that's another trail there, and you can hear a jet flying overhead. You see that large plume of smoke there from another interception. This is the soundtrack to Israel at the moment, and that's another element to it. Just that chiming sound you can hear is the alert that is now played out on mobile phones and devices across this country. That is a warning that is sent out on apps on people's phones and other devices, warning them of incoming missiles and telling them to take shelter. That's a very, very loud intercept there. That doesn't feel as if that one is too far away. There will be many more attacks like this, and Israel is bracing itself.
Challenging days lie ahead for us. Every military action involves risk, but the risk of not acting is immeasurably greater, because if we do not act, we will face a nuclear Iran, an Iran with tens of thousands of ballistic missiles, an Iran that will work to destroy us and be immune to our countermeasures.
But Iran's response went much wider than just Israel. In Bahrain, where a port and an American base were among the targets. In Dubai, where Iranian missiles struck buildings, including the famous Fairmont Hotel. And in Qatar, rocked by missiles and explosions. Diplomatic talks between Iran and America were due to resume next week. Now those negotiations are dead as the region retreats into war. Attacks went on into the night. Israel launched the largest aerial assault in its history. Iran has continued by firing missiles back. In this most volatile of regions, war is always a prospect, and now, once again, it has become a reality. America has extraordinary might. Israel has long-held convictions. But for Iran's regime, this is now a fight for survival. The stakes are toweringly, worryingly high. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Jerusalem.
And Adam is back with me live now in Jerusalem. We've just heard the Israeli Prime Minister, then, Adam, talking to the Iranian people, saying flood the streets and finish the job. It is a big question whether that will happen.
It's a crucial question, I think, now, Mark, because what we are seeing from Benjamin Netanyahu and earlier from Donald Trump is an explanation about why they have launched this war. For so long, the talk has been about three things. Been about nuclear enrichment, it's about Iran's build-up of ballistic missiles, and it's been about Iran's long-standing support of proxies, notably Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza and the Houthis in Yemen. And you put all those things together, and what you have now is both of these leaders saying that what they want is regime change in Iran. They want people to come back on the streets. They want to rediscover the vigor of those protests from some weeks ago that really did seem to threaten the Iranian regime, which has been in power for the best part of half a century. From the perspective of Netanyahu and Trump, that is a powerful claim. It is something they think that people will get behind. It's also a risky one, because right now, are people going to come out on and protest on the streets when there are missiles coming down on Iran? It would take a brave protester to be sure that it is worth risking their life, because so many thousands of protesters were killed by the Iranian authorities anyway, but also to risk it because air attacks are being launched. Is there a risk that people will actually gather behind the flag, as has happened in many countries over many years, that however much you may hate the leadership, you also hate the idea of your country being attacked? And also, what happens if there is no momentum towards regime change? How long can America and Israel maintain attacks, maintain a war purpose if it isn't leading to that conclusion? And I suspect that will be part of Iran's strategy, to soak up some of this, to retaliate, and then to say, look, we are here to stay. This regime is not going anywhere. Let's return to negotiations. This is high-stakes stuff. And it's not clearly just about diplomacy. It is about real-world damage, about people being killed in Iran, and also about those reciprocal attacks that have happened here in Israel. We've seen many interceptions of missiles above Jerusalem today. We've seen debris falling over there earlier this afternoon, plumes of smoke coming there. We saw similar huge plumes of smoke just over the other side of Jerusalem. We are seeing this, and so are Israelis up and down this country, and of course in the region. Explosions in Bahrain and Dubai, in Qatar. People are seeing the real life impact of this war on day one, and sustaining the support. Well, it may be feasible here, but in this wider region, it's going to be harder. And of course, for the American administration, they're going to have to sustain support among a MAGA base who are already reluctant to throw their weight behind another foreign war. The longer this drags on, the harder it may be to keep that support. And all the indications at the moment, Mark, are that this war will drag on. Iran has built up a big arsenal of missiles, and as we know from the 12-day war last year, it is an obdurate opponent for even the most heavily armed army and military power in the world. As I said earlier, the stakes here are very, very high, and in a volatile region, war has returned once again.
OK, Adam, thank you very much. And the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has said that there are many signs indicating that the Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, is no longer. Many signs that he is gone, he said, without confirming his death. Well, this evening I spoke to the Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman, Esmail Baghai, who said that he was safe and well. Have a listen to the interview. I asked him first for his reaction to the attack on his country. Mr. Baghai, thank you very much for talking to us. First of all, what is your reaction to this attack on your country?
Thank you. This is an act of aggression. This is an unprovoked, unwarranted act of aggression that is targeting innocent people, civilian infrastructure. This morning, one of the first missiles that targeted Iran, in fact, targeted a primary school in Mina, Hormozgan province, southern Iran, and it killed more than 70 innocent little girls. Still, there are tens of people, tens of little girls under the rubble. So this was not the first case. Many other buildings, medical centers were also hit by American and Israeli act of aggression during the course of today.
There are also reports that many senior leaders in Iran have been killed. Does that include the Supreme Leader? Is the Supreme Leader still alive, and is the President still alive?
Thanks to God, they are all safe and sound. Yes, we have had some martyrs, some commanders who have been martyred as the result of this terrorist act of aggression. But what matters is that the Iranian nation, our armed forces, our brave armed forces, are taking necessary measures to defend Iran in the most strongest way possible.
Isn't the truth that you could have avoided this by simply doing a deal with the United States and saying you would never have a nuclear weapon? President Trump was never going to allow you to have a nuclear weapon, and there was a chance to do a deal.
How many times has Iran said that we would not seek nuclear weapon? Come on. We made a deal in 2015. But right 3 years later, in 2018, the United States withdrew from the deal unilaterally. Again, during the past 9 months, we entered into negotiations with the United States. You remember in June, we were in the middle of the negotiations, and we have always said that Iran is not seeking nuclear weapons. Just show me one single report by the IAEA that can certify Iran's deviating from peaceful purposes. That's a big lie that has been propagated by the United States, by Israeli lobby inside the United States for the past 4 decades, that Iran is going to have nuclear weapon. There is no nuclear weapon. Iran has never sought to have nuclear weapons, period.
But President Trump is arguing that you are not taking the talks seriously. America considers you a threat. Israel clearly considers you a threat. And you are also, it is now obvious, are a threat to your own people, having killed so many people simply trying to protest and express their freedom of speech.
That's not true.
Which part of that?
Come on, both of them. You Europeans, the European Union, European countries always regard themselves as the custodian of the rule of law. Show me just one single rule of law or logic that if one country regards another country as a threat, they are allowed under international law simply to launch an attack.
But
what kind of threat? Come on, what kind of threat do you think Iran was posing to the United States? Did we go to the Gulf of Mexico to attack the United States? They have come from 6,500 miles away to our shore.
Right.
They have created so many military bases around Iran. And right now, they are attacking Iran. And you are saying that Iran is a threat to Israel and to the United States?
Well, you're clearly a threat to Israel. You want to destroy Israel. Now, President Trump wants regime change.
Why do you say that? Why do you say that?
Because
no, come on. Please do not change the facts. It was the Israel and the United States that attacked Iran, not vice versa. In June, they attacked Iran. Right now, they are telling everyone clearly that we launched an attack against Iran. It was not Iran that launched an attack against the United States or Israel.
But the position now is that President Trump is clearly after regime change. He wants the people of Iran to rise up and overthrow the government. Do you think that could happen?
That's an illusion. That's, again, an unlawful act of aggression. That's against the right of self-determination of the people. The Iranian nation decided 47 years ago to overthrow the dictatorship that was supported by the United States. The Iranian nation knows how to take care of their destiny. It is not for any outsiders to claim that they are trying to help Iranian nation. Our people saw it by their own eyes when the United States tried to help us by killing innocent girls in Minab and other cities.
Right.
The junior schoolers were massacred in many cities in Iran. That was the kind of help that the United States are going to provide to Iranians. And by the way, that I think more or less this is the same help that perhaps they did it in 1953 when they launched the coup d'etat against Iran.
But when you have killed so many people, thousands of people, in those...
It's a lie. It's a lie.
We have reports...
We gave a number. No, it's a lie.
We have reports of 6,400, and the suggestion is many more.
No, the exact number was 3,170%.
Well, even if it's that, it's a lot of people.
Of course it is. Even one precious life matters for us. But you have to tell this to the American administrations, to the Israelis, who agitated the public. They were part of this turning into violence, the peaceful protest. The peaceful protest was turned into violence by Israeli and American agents who were carrying weapons and who were killing peaceful protesters. They have to be accountable for many of these killings.
But it wasn't the Americans and the Israelis killing the innocent protesters. It was the Iranian authorities.
It was their agents. Come on, their agents.
Let me just ask you about Qatar and Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states who are saying that your attacks on those countries today, Qatar has said an unacceptable act of aggression. The Saudis are calling the attacks cowardly. You're antagonizing key intermediaries in this dispute with the United States.
We are not attacking any of our neighbors. What we are doing is in exercise of our right of self-defense against the American and Israeli act of aggression. In fact, the United States is abusing the soil, the territory of our neighbors in order to carry out this unlawful act of aggression. And as I said, we attach high importance to our friendly relations with our neighbors in the Persian Gulf region. This morning, Minister Arakchi talked to his counterparts and assured them that these strikes have nothing to do with these countries. It is only targeting the bases that are the source of American aggression against Iran.
How long do you think you can survive in this war? How long can you defend yourself for?
We have to defend ourselves. We have no other choice other than defending ourselves with all might.
Can you see the talks ever resuming after what has happened?
We prefer right now to focus on defending our territory, defending our national security, defending our people.
And just finally, is it the intention of Iran to effectively close the Straits of Hormuz?
As I said right now, we are focusing on how to defend in the best way possible our people and our territory against this act of aggression. Our armed forces understand, our armed forces decide how best to defend our territory and our sovereignty against this act of aggression.
But could that include effectively closing the Straits of Hormuz?
As I said, the way we would defend ourselves depends on the decision by our brave armed forces.
Mr. Bagai, thank you very much for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, now, that interview was recorded a short time ago, and there you have it, the Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman saying that Khamenei, the supreme leader, is alive and well. We've just heard Benjamin Netanyahu saying the signs are growing that Iran's supreme leader is no longer, as he put it. Let's talk to Mark Stone in Washington. And Mark, just on this issue of whether Khamenei is alive or dead, are the Americans shedding any light on this?
No. In a word, President Trump is down in Mar-a-Lago, which in and of itself is relatively remarkable. I can't think of a time other than Trump and Venezuela at the beginning of the year when an American president has not been at the White House when something like this is launched. With Venezuela, which be in no doubt was a completely different situation. It was a one and done, in and out moment. This is not. But for Venezuela, he was in Mar-a-Lago at a makeshift situation room. He is again today for this altogether different situation, a war, he is calling it, and he is calling for regime change. What I can tell you is that from Mar-a-Lago, Mark, he has spoken to the leaders of Saudi Arabia, of Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and also to the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, with whom we know he has a good relationship. Although, in the context of what we've seen unfolding over the course of the past 12 hours, I think that organisations like NATO and like the UN, where there will be a Security Council meeting a little later on, feel kind of almost quaint, given the unilateral action that America and Israel have chosen to take. And we have seen over the course of the day the diplomatic manoeuvres that have gone on with different countries, perhaps privately reluctant to put themselves side by side with the United States, but one by one doing so in in their kind of nuanced way. I mean, Canada and Australia quite quick out of the blocks. We've seen the Gulfies, as they're often referred to, the Gulf Arab countries, who are on the front line of all this, getting very quickly behind President Trump. They've kind of got no other option. But Britain's perspective here is fascinating, and I think it's going to be a strain on the special relationship. Keir Starmer at pains to frame Britain's involvement as defensive and as only being part of it after the initial strike by the Americans. So very much not side by side in the initial decision by the Americans to carry out these strikes. And there remains a question mark over the use of British bases like RAF Fairford in Gloucestershire, Lakenheath in East Anglia, and Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. Key British bases that the Americans need if this is to become a prolonged war. And I've not got any clarity at the moment on the legality of all of that. So that's an issue to watch for sure. Of course, the other thing, Mark, is how all this goes down in the United States. You know, President Trump was the America First president. He's the president who said in his victory speech, "I'm not going to start a war. I'm going to stop wars." And yet, what has he done now? He has unilaterally decided to start one. I guess he will argue when we hear from him in more detail that he's starting one in order to create peace down the line. That will be his argument. And I think, you know, there seem to me to be three strands to all of this. There's the nuclear, there's disarming Iran's nuclear capability. There's the ballistic missiles, but then there's the regime change. And he was so clear in his statement that came after he'd orchestrated and announced the attacks. He was so clear in his statement that this is about regime change. Now, my perspective is that regime change requires a plan for the day after. There is no plan at the moment. It requires us a clear strategy of succession within Iran. That doesn't exist at the moment. And regime change without all of that becomes regime collapse. And that sort of sucks the protagonists in. So that's the danger for President Trump. If he can be in and out of this one in a week or so, well, it'll be kind of a booyah moment for his supporters, and the gamble would have paid off. But it's a big if.
And while you're speaking, Mark, Axios is reporting that Donald Trump says I can go long and take over the whole thing or end it in 2 or 3 days. He said that it would take Iran several years to recover from this attack. And he said, interestingly, that Iranians got close, then pulled back on these talks. I understood from that, he apparently told Axios that they didn't really want a deal. So President Trump speaking to Axios, it seems, rather than the nation, which itself is, well, quite extraordinary.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, in normal circumstances, if a president was going to make the decision that President Trump has now made, various things would happen. In the weeks prior, there would be a sort of a strategic plan to prepare the American people for for the choice that the president is about to make. There would be they would be trying to begin to justify what they felt they needed to do. President Trump did not do that. Yes, when he was asked, he kind of justified why he might need to take military action, but there was never a sort of conscious effort to explain to the American people why this action was necessary. It was the State of the Union on Tuesday. That was the perfect forum to be able to do that. And yet it was an hour into his speech, more than an hour into his speech, before he started talking about Iran. And when he did, my sense was he was almost trying to give diplomacy a chance. So I think that's really important. He hasn't got congressional approval for this either. There is a almost a constitutional imperative to get congressional approval. He has decided not to do that as well. And as I said, there is, I was speaking to an ambassador last week of a European country who said to me, "We do not have a day after plan for Iran." Now that's striking. If this all spirals, there is no day after plan for Iran. We all remember Afghanistan, and we certainly all remember Iraq after 2003. No plan and years of war.
Yeah, OK, Mark, thank you very much indeed. Just another line from President Trump speaking to the website Axios. He says, I've had a great conversation with Benjamin Netanyahu. We're on the same wavelength. So that there from President Trump. Joining me now is Elliot Abrams, Special Representative for Iran during President Trump's first term. Thank you very much for being with us. And if, as Benjamin Netanyahu seems to be saying, that the Supreme Leader, Khamenei, is, as he puts it, no longer, if he is dead, what impact would that have on Iran and this whole situation, do you think?
It's a probable war aim to get him out. And if the desire is to bring down the regime, then killing him is a piece of that. I do want to say, I think what your correspondent, Mark, just said is wrong. Trump broke two of his rules here, the one and done rule and the no casualties rule. He did not break the no invasion rule. This is not like Afghanistan and Iraq. There are 0 American troops going to be in Iran. So this may be a 2-day war, it may be a 10-day war, but the references to Afghanistan and Iraq, I think, are wrong.
Well, I think the point that Mark Stone was making was that when you start these things, you don't know how they end. And I mean, obviously, Iraq ended in a quagmire. Afghanistan didn't go that well. And his suggestion was that once you start this and you have an air campaign, it's all very uncertain and unpredictable. It's
certainly unpredictable. But the president is not going to be sending American troops into Iran. I do think on the question of why he didn't alert Americans more, of course, he wanted the element of surprise. That's part of it. And he is counting, maybe rightly, maybe wrongly, on the idea that Americans have some knowledge of Iran as an enemy country, the only country saying death to America. People remember everything from the Iran hostage crisis to the killings of Americans in Iraq. He's counting on that. We'll see whether he's counting on it rightly.
Why this and why now, do you think? Isn't it all a huge gamble? And the other point really is that the talks were ongoing. There was talk of some progress in the diplomacy in Geneva. More talks were planned for next week. I just wonder why now, or was this always the plan, do you think?
Well, the words about the talks making good progress came from Oman and they came from Iran. They did not come from the United States. And the Americans, I think, pretty clearly thought the Iranians were never going to make the compromises that Trump thought necessary. For example, 0 enrichment. Why now, as opposed to, well, I was going to say as opposed to January. He was busy in Venezuela in January, but why not wait 3 more months, 6 more months? It is possible that election timing is part of this. But the decision certainly goes back to the day when you start assembling forces. In the Caribbean, Venezuela, and now in the Gulf region, the president has pretty much shown that when he brings these troops, ships, air power together, he makes a very quick decision on whether to use them. These things don't stretch out months. So when you see him assembling these armadas, you can pretty well predict the outcome.
How dangerous do you think this is? These, as I was saying, these wars are unpredictable. It could lead to the implosion of the regime. It could lead to chaos. How dangerous do you think this is?
Well, the danger really for the United States and nearby countries is, first of all, loss of life. So far, I don't think there is a large amount of loss of life in any of the Arab countries or Israel or of Americans. So the president did warn the American people in his initial statement that that might well be coming. There's another danger, which is to oil. And it is striking to me that we're now, whatever, 9 hours into this or something like that, that Iran has not chosen to attack oil facilities. A few years ago, they did attack the largest oil facility in Saudi Arabia, Abqaiq. Not today. They're hitting U.S. bases so far and some other targets, but they may be afraid that if they hit an economic target in any of the Arab countries, you know, they'll get hit in return. If that happens, you'll see the price of oil skyrocket, and that'll have an effect on every economy, including the U.S. economy. And again, this is an election year here.
And just finally, this idea of people rising up, the Iranian people rising up against the regime, overthrowing the regime. I mean, Benjamin Netanyahu is kind of saying over to you, really, to the Iranian people. Is that realistic? Is that possible? Do you think it would happen?
I think the president is also saying over to you. That is, we're not invading, so we're going to hit the regime, then over to you. Is it possible? Sure. I mean, the Iranian people have risen up 5 or 6 times in the last 20 years, including very recently. And of course, that gave rise to the mass murder by the regime. That could happen again, or maybe this time enough people are in the streets so that the regime actually does fall. Is it likely? I would say it's less than 50-50, but it's certainly plausible.
OK, Elliot Abrams, thank you very much for coming on. Just a little bit of breaking news. Oman has urged Iran to respect the sovereignty of states, international law and neighbourly relations with Gulf states. That's interesting because that's from the Foreign Ministry of Oman. It was Oman the Foreign Minister of Oman, who's been shuttling between the two sides at these talks in Geneva, and Oman clearly angry about what's been happening with these waves of missile attacks and drones, and Oman urging Iran to respect the sovereignty of states. Well, as we've heard, Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu have both called for Iranian citizens to take to the streets. Our international correspondent, John Sparks, has been looking at the reaction from inside Iran, from the regime itself and from those opposed to it.
The war came from above. Metallic streaks and powerful explosions through the windows and on the streets of the capital, Tehran. This, the first day of the working week. The Americans and the Israelis encountered little or no resistance, their planes and missiles striking targets at will. They hit offices and residences, military installations and weapons programs. But they were after the country's rulers as well, past and present. Here's what's left of former President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad's residence. His chief of staff told us he survived. This operation has been launched in a deeply divided country, and those divisions were on display as the mission began. I love Trump, he says. Here we see civilians celebrating the attack. Such is their loathing for the Iranian regime. And on a rooftop, women watch breathlessly after a strike on northwest Tehran. They've hit the residence, says one. A reference to the compound of the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. Yet the Islamic Republic has supporters as well, and they took to the streets with impromptu rallies. God is great, chants this man, and collective prayer for themselves, for their leaders, for the regime. The opening phase of this operation has caused much chaos and led to much loss of life. Iranian state media says more than 80 people were killed at a girls' school when it was struck by 3 missiles. Dozens more are reportedly injured. Images of blood-stained backpacks won't win supporters to the American side. The state broadcaster moved itself into an emergency studio, fearing an aerial attack, with this newsreader advising Tehran residents to leave the city for their own safety. But the authorities are trying to deal with a different sort of threat. This is Reza Pahlavi, son of the country's last king, now presenting himself as the heir apparent. And in an address he said, "Stay where you are."
I ask you to remain in your homes for now and preserve your safety and security. Stay vigilant and ready so that at the appropriate time, which I will announce to you precisely, you can return to the streets for the final action.
The people of Iran know that their rulers will fight until the bitter end. Years of failed protests have taught them that. And a bombing campaign, well, it's highly unlikely to dislodge them. John Sparks, Sky News.
John Sparks there, and we were just hearing growing suggestions from Benjamin Netanyahu in his televised address that Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, as Netanyahu put it, is no longer. Let's just have a listen to what Benjamin Netanyahu had to say about this.
This morning was a surprising hit, a blow. We hit out at the tyrant, Khamenei. For 3 decades, he has been sending terror with proxies and has made his people miserable and continue talking about the extermination of the state of Israel. This plan and program no longer exists. This tyrant no longer exists.
So many signs that Khamenei is no longer. I spoke to the foreign ministry spokesman in Iran just about an hour and a half ago, and he said that Khamenei was safe and well. Now we're hearing also from a senior Israeli official who has been speaking to the Reuters news agency and who is saying that Khamenei is dead and his body has been found. That's according to a senior Israeli official, according to the Reuters news agency. Dominic Waghorn is here with me. So this is coming out in drips and drabs, really, from the Israeli side, clearly. If the supreme leader is dead, what is the significance of that?
Well, if he is dead, it is hugely significant because, you know, he has ruled Iran for 36 years as the supreme leader, and he's lived up to his name. You know, he believes he's able to rule by divine right. His sort of religious and political writ intervenes and intrudes into everybody's lives and the minutest details of those lives. And his personality, really, as well as his politics, have kind of defined the way Iran conducts itself on the world stage as much as the way his government conducts itself at home. So I think, you know, we need to be cautious because it will be momentous news. And what we can say at the moment is the Israelis believe he is dead, and they're getting more and more forthright, aren't they, about what they believe has happened to him and their belief that he's dead. And we've just heard, what we can say from the Iranian point of view is that we've heard from Ismail Baghai, the spokesman for the foreign minister that you spoke to, who said that as far as he knows, he's safe and sound. And that echoed what Syed Abbas Araghchi, his boss and foreign minister, said as well. I think it's interesting they both use the same words. Yeah. It suggests they're reading from a script, and it's slightly suspicious, I think, that they did so. But we'll wait to have final confirmation that he is dead.
I mean, he's old and ill, so presumably there was some kind of succession planning anyway.
Yeah, he's 86. He's not well. He's been able to maintain his totalitarian grip on power despite his age and his frailties. But as you say, there's been a lot of speculation about who was going to succeed him and what kind of plans he was putting into place. Could it be his son, who is not just a kind of political and religious figure, but also a successful businessman? Could it be an IRGC commander who might replace him? And what he's been doing in the last few weeks, Mark, reportedly is kind of delegating to people. Most recently to Ali Larijani, who's a former nuclear negotiator, who's a hardliner, saying that if he's killed, then Larijani will replace him. So kind of securing lines of command and succession there. And so that could mitigate, I guess, the impact of a power vacuum. But I think it's fair to say that, if he is dead, there's going to be a power struggle. And even while he was alive and heading towards what would have been a natural death, the speculation was still that the other power structures in Iran, particularly the IRGC, the military and the intelligence wings of the kind of security establishment, if you like, in Iran, would take the opportunity of his death to sort of sideline the Ayatollahs and the mullahs and the religious wings of the government there, because there's so much resentment and frustration about the totalitarian theocratic rule that ordinary Iranians have been living under, and maybe offer a kind of change of regime, or a change within the regime rather than an actual change of regime. Maybe the IRGC replacing the Ayatollah. So that speculation has kind of existed already while he was alive and wasn't facing any kind of unnatural death. I guess we could be looking at a similar scenario if he is actually dead. But obviously, in a time of war, I think it's hard to predict how this is going to unfold now.
Yeah. OK, I'm just looking. I mean, there's bits of news coming in all the time. But the Iranians saying in an interview about an hour ago that the Supreme Leader is safe and well. We're hearing increasingly out of Israel, not confirmed, but increasingly out of Israel, that is not the case. Joining me now is Dr. Dan Diker, who is president of the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. And good evening to you. And I don't know whether you can shed any light on this. There doesn't seem to be any confirmation, but this has been hinted at by Benjamin Netanyahu. And now we're hearing that other Israeli officials, rather, are talking to Reuters and saying that Khamenei is dead. What are you hearing there?
Mark, good evening to you all in London from Jerusalem. I heard fewer than 10 minutes ago, by the way of the Israeli media, by the leading commentators on Israeli international affairs, that the Supreme Leader may be well, healthy and well, but not in this world, that he has been killed. And we're facing, it's a new reality today in Tehran. And as the gentleman said on the program, the beginning of a new power struggle for leadership. My sense of it is, and we at the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs, who have dealt with the highest levels of the Israeli opposition, believe that there is a major thrust towards a different type of Iranian leadership, one that tends to parallel the type of demonstrations that we've seen among the Iranian public for a free Iran, as opposed to a frightened Iran in the type of regime that we've seen for the last 47 years.
Right, let me jump in there. The Iranian state media is now quoting the head of public relations at the Supreme Leader's office saying, well, not that he's alive, but saying that the enemy is resorting to mental warfare. All should be aware. So, well, it's difficult to say. I mean, were he to be dead, what do you think the impact would be?
Very consequential, in fact, because the Iranian people understand the sources of Iranian regime negotiating behavior based on strength and power. And it was clear, if we remember back in 1979, when the Shah fell from power, that people were beginning to yell at the end of the Shah's reign, Khomeini, Khomeini, and many people didn't know who Khomeini was. They're looking for the next powerful leader in order to take the reins, and they respect that type of power. But this is a new morning for the Iranian people. So many of them, by the tens of thousands, have lost their lives in fighting this regime, and hundreds of thousands have been wounded. And there is a major thrust, as you probably know, in the Iranian public for democracy, freedom, and pro-Western sentiment. So I'm quite unsure that the leadership will move from the religious leaders in Qom to the most severe members of the IRGC. I'm quite sure that the United States and its allies, particularly Israel, would like to see a free Iran. And Prime Minister Netanyahu just minutes ago was shown to speak directly to the Iranian people, similar to President Trump, saying, take your future in your own hands, the future of freedom, the future of security and liberty out of and the end of so many decades of fear, trembling, and trauma that this murderous regime has enforced on its own people, and by the way, on Brits and on Israelis and on Americans as well over the last 4.5 decades.
Now, what about the timing of this? I mean, I asked because there were these reports suggesting that there was some progress in this diplomacy in Geneva, a deal, we were told, by Oman, the foreign minister who was dealing with it, and by the Iranians. A deal was within reach. So why attack now?
You know, if we had gone back in the middle of the 20th century when Prime Minister Winston Churchill, during the evacuation of Dunkirk, was talking about fighting in the streets, fighting in the hills, fighting in the cities, we will never surrender. We are dealing with not only this era's Nazi regime, but we are dealing with a Nazi regime on steroids that is actually a regime that enters into hospitals and shoots children in the face. Would you trust such a regime to talk about diplomacy? This is really an issue of civilization opposite the worst form of barbarism. And in fact, I must say, as somebody who calls himself a student of the Middle East and of Iran, that there is a concept, as you probably are familiar with, called taqiyya, which is dissimulation, which is saying what it is that your adversaries or those sitting across would like to hear from you. The Iranian regime cheats, robs, and steals. That's what they do. That's what they believe. And that's why, in the end of the day, President Trump did not fall for that. And after this complete collapse, there was a collapse in diplomacy because the sides, factually speaking, did not agree on any of the conditions.
Right. Just finally, isn't it the truth, though, that Benjamin Netanyahu always wanted diplomacy to fail, really? He wanted to launch a military attack like this.
Not at all. Not at all. He would be very happy to engage in the kind of diplomacy that he was actually taking the risk, together with President Trump, to engage in opposite the new powers in Gaza, even those that come from the Palestinian Authority, who have incited to mass murder, who have incentivized its people to terror. So no, he very much wanted diplomacy, and in fact, let me please just finish the sentence. Prime Minister Netanyahu and the IDF have issued leaflets to the Iranian people telling them where to evacuate in order to avoid any civilian deaths. But as far as the regime is concerned, there's no one home to negotiate with. This is our era's version of the Nazi regime, and as Prime Minister Churchill said, they must be defeated.
Dr. Dijker, well, I'm sorry, we've got to move on, but I appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just some breaking news. Reuters, quoting a senior Trump administration official, is saying the US had indications that Iran had intended to strike preemptively, and that President Trump decided not to let US forces absorb attacks from missiles. The senior Trump administration official, we don't know who it is, said the president had no choice. We went with very blunt questions of the Iranians. There was no seriousness on the Iranian side to achieve a real deal. This is all a senior Trump official, anonymous, talking to Reuters. US offered to provide Iran with free nuclear fuel forever, but Iran insisted on enrichment capability. And we were reading intelligence that said Iran was in the throes of rebuilding all that had been destroyed in attacks last June. So preparing there the US argument and essentially saying that this was a preemptive attack. Now, as we've been hearing, Iran struck back today, hitting targets in Bahrain, Qatar, Abu Dhabi and Dubai. Our correspondent, Sally Lockwood, is in Dubai for us, and many Gulf states, Sally, drawn into this war.
Yeah, that's right, Mark. It's been a rather surreal and unnerving day here in the UAE, like many of the neighbouring countries here. One person killed in Abu Dhabi by falling debris after missiles were intercepted over Abu Dhabi. And a number of waves of missiles were heard flying over Dubai, loud bangs heard where I am here. And of course, those scenes that unfolded on Dubai's iconic Palm, the Fairmont Hotel there, apparently hit by what looked like a drone strike, a plume of smoke rising into the air and flames spotted, authorities confirming that 4 people were injured in that attack. And we're hearing as well that residents and citizens here have chosen to shelter in basements and underground car parks today because of the nature of what's been unfolding here. Scenes that would have been absolutely unthinkable 24 hours ago. And we're also hearing not just about the missile and drone attacks on neighbouring countries, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait airport, but also disruption now in the Strait of Hormuz, just to the north of here. That's the very narrow waterway between Oman and the UAE to the south and Iran to the north, at 21 miles wide at its most narrow point. And it's a choke point for so much of the world's oil. Around 1/5 of the world's oil passes through there. And we're hearing reports that the Revolutionary Guard is blocking tankers from passing through there. Others are choosing to turn around, and some are suspending their sailings. Now, we've also had confirmation from the White House that Donald Trump has spoken to the leaders of the UAE, Qatar and Saudi today. We have no more detail on what was said in those phone calls, but I can't imagine they're very happy about how things have unfolded today. There's a big difference between targeting American military assets and attacks that impact
Sally, we've got to
civilians
leave it
and
there, I'm
residents that
afraid.
live in these countries.
Yeah, I apologise. We've got to leave it there. We're running out of time. I just want to recap on the breaking news that the growing indications out of Israel that Khamenei, the supreme leader in Iran, is dead. Benjamin Netanyahu saying in an address that he is no longer, although I have to point out there is no confirmation and certainly no word from the United States. Much more on all this at the top of the hour.